Ohio gozaimasu. So, because, like I said, I literally don't give a fuck about making money on this platform because most of what this platform wants is me to bash feminism. Just gonna read an article, today. Just don't fucking care what these guys think. The relatively recent development of the anti-bullying campaign has been almost universally accepted as something that's unquestionably good for these campaigns that are politically correct. They are focused on kids, a largely unhateable group, and they are relatively easy to get behind for most people, with the exception of some religious groups who support that kind of like they're. Oh, by the way, of religious groups, they're against anti-bullying campaign. They're against anti-bullying efforts because if we don't allow bullying in school, they can't bash people for being gay anymore without getting in trouble. Because for the campaigns have surged in popularity with celebrity endorsements and the almost immediate enthusiastic incorporation of anti-bullying into discourse into elementary and high school. Projects like Dan Savage's It Gets Better, aimed at inspiring hope in alienated and harassed LGBT kids, are hard to criticize, particularly in light of the stats around the likelihood of suicide attempts by these youth. But while anti-bullying campaigns grow ever more popular and schools rush to adopt anti-bullying training for teachers, parents put on anti-bullying events and create anti-bullying programs and policies, generally patting themselves on the back for implementing these progressive measures, the elephant in the room grows ever more visible. The elephant is, of course, girls and women. We're incorporating words like homophobia, gender, ethnicity, or the favorite, diversity into schools. Plans to, quote, tackle the bullying problem seem easy for school boards, the media, and the public to swallow. That uncomfortable word, women, remains distinctly absent from the conversation. We seem to be able to talk about a number of different ways people can be bullied or harassed in schools, focusing largely on issues such as sexual orientation or gender identity, without addressing the harassment or naming women and girls as a specific target. Sexism starts early; it starts in the classroom, and we can all manage to rally behind. And all we can manage to rally behind is the neutral bullying. Why? StopBullying.gov says that bullying can take many shapes and form, isn't limited by age, gender, or education level, but can it happen because of sexism? Nah, who knows? And why we are apparently becoming comfortable with language around the word challenging homophobic bullying and celebrating difference, our different understanding of the ways in which young men learn to view women, which begins early on, is left distinctly off the table. Explaining to kids that calling someone a fag or using the word gay in a derogatory sense is happening is good, but in a derogatory sense is happening, but it isn't good that it's happening. Part part of what's missing though, it isn't good that people are being called fag or gay, to clarify exactly what I mean. Although explaining to them that this is happening is good. Part of what's missing though is that the recognition that generally boys are called gay because they act too much, quote, like girls, unquote, because yes, being a girl is still a bad thing. When Lady Gaga got on board with anti-bullying campaigns at school, she said, as a part of her message, it's important that we push the boundaries of love and acceptance. It's important that we spread tolerance and equality for all students. I'm going to be working as hard as I can to make bullying a hate crime. And of course, that's a pretty good message, not much to argue with there. Certainly, no one believes that anyone else should be harassed because they fail to conform to universal standards of masculinity. Lady Gaga in the video is addressing Jacques Sapir, who, quote, was bullied in elementary school by students who called him a fag for being interested in theater and drama. But let's think about what it is, what it means to be a man. What it means to be masculine, as far as avoiding being called a quote fag goes, anyways, is not like a woman. It means being tough, unemotional, often athletic, and not, i.e., not into theater or physically strong. Sometimes it means being violent or aggressive, and often, of course, we understand that masculinity in terms of how a man views and treats women. In order to avoid harassment, as a boy, you must pass as adequately masculine. In order to be adequately masculine, you must not only be clearly not like a girl, but you must see women as quote less than, while simultaneously trying to fuck them. Being fucked by a man means you're a less than. As a man, if you enjoy or desire to be fucked by another man, it means you aren't adequately masculine. And that feminization, that feminization comes along with being fucked by men, makes you deserving of harassment. This, of course, Of course, the only issue at play when it comes to homophobia is one of them. In light of the recent sexual harassment claims, which come on around the RCMP, wherein Corporal Catherine Galliford detailed the years of harassment and eventually led to her to take medical leave on account of the stress and emotional toil, the stress that the treatment had taken her. One would think a light would have gone off in someone's head. Hey, one might think, I wonder where when this kind of behavior starts. I wonder how men when learn to treat women like sex objects. I wonder if there's any way that we can curb this behavior before it becomes completely normalized. Galliford's experience was not an anomaly. Only women have since come out about the harassment they experienced in the RCMP. Well, from men planting pornography in female coworkers' desk to proposing to inappropriate touching, it's clear that this kind of behavior on the parts of men is both common and unacceptable. But how seriously does the state take sexual harassment, and how willing are we as a society to actually address the issue? It feels a bit awkward to witness the immediate danger and embrace of anti-bullying campaigns while the sexual harassment and sexism remain so common. And by the way, this is not how I normally sound. My voice, I can tell like there's something going on with my throat. For me, the experience of sexual harassment, well, not for me, I didn't get sexually harassed, but the author of this piece was introduced when I was about 11. I remember very specifically meeting the teacher along with several other grade 6 girls because boys in our class had taken to making comments about our prepubescent or non-existent breast. And while I believe this kind of behavior was addressed with individual boys who were doing the harassing, there was never any kind of discussion about sexism or sexual harassment as a part of any program or curriculum in all of my years of school. For the rest of the boys, for those who aren't called out by individuals early on, or who don't have feminist parents, I can imagine that sexual harassment just becomes part of the routine of presenting out as masculine. As I was in grade 6 in about 1991, I imagine this kind of behavior and sexual harassment has been experienced by many, many girls before me and continues to be a common experience today. Boys learn very early on, girls are 4, and they learn very early on how men should treat women in order to be adequately masculine to be accepted by their peer group. Something happened to me. Screws went loose. I stopped caring about fitting in with my peer group. And yet, as pointed out by a friend who is currently completing a PhD in education, the concept of sexism and the shape of sexual harassment remains non-existent in both elementary and high school curriculum. And in reality, is it really a mystery that men growing up to sexually harass women on the streets, in the workplace, in bars, and generally anywhere women might be, when they are never taught that this behavior won't be tolerated? While we all seem to be madly in love with the idea of anti-bullying campaigns and have managed very quickly to start creating programs across North America to address the issues of bullying in schools, we have, in all the years of sexism and sexual harassment, never mind rape and assault, that has existed from early on in the schools, to address the issue of patriarchy. We have yet to make a concerted effort to address the ways in which boys learn to treat women as objects that don't deserve their respect in school. We even seem to talk about equality without mentioning the word sexism. We seem to be able to talk about gender without mentioning the word women. And we talk a lot about harassment without mentioning the fact that both bullying and harassment are things that women experience on a fairly constant basis from time to time they are very young, simply because they are girls in a man's world. When we say gender today, what we mean is gender expression or gender identity. It's become a very neutral term, and as it has become a way for the state and law to avoid naming women as a target. As far as anti-bullying campaigns go, girls are not named as a specific target, even though gender and equality are common terms within this discourse. And while it's good that we are addressing the idea that boys need not fit into this prescribed role of masculinity, we seem to be completely afraid to address why is it that the consequences of a system that views masculinity as, quote, good is simply because it isn't femininity are for women of that culture. And while the neutrality of the word gender is used as in anti-bullying campaigns, as far as the distinct absence of a focus on sexual harassment or the absence of words like sexism or, quote, patriarchy, anti-bullying campaigns appear to remain safely designated for boys. And I wanted to get into this particular topic because it's why I'm pissed off at being called a fag in the first place. Because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, with the word faggot, you're too much like a girl. I'm fucking sick of it, as if I should be ashamed of being like the one thing I admire the most in this fucking awful, disgusting world. I mean, I literally don't give a fuck either, by the way. I have to have a few screws loose to even come on here and read this article on YouTube of all places, because where are all the men?